In this video, we're going to take a look at 5 powerful tips that every new user in Apple Motion should know about. The first tip is going to save you an enormous amount of time. Here in Motion, I have this basic gradient background that I've created, and I've also added in this nice noise texture. Now, I actually use this background all of the time, but I don't want to have to recreate it with these same exact settings every time I open a new Motion project. So that is where favorites come into play. To add a favorite, all you need to do is jump on over into your library, scroll on down, and locate either your favorites folder or favorites menu. I personally prefer the favorites menu whenever possible because that gives you super easy access here at the top of the screen. Now, what's cool with favorites is you can drag in pretty much anything you can possibly think of. So for example, I have this group labeled as subscribe, which contains the circle and the background. I can either click and drag just a singular object, for example, my dawn purple background, and we can bring that over here to the favorites menu. If I want to add it to a folder, I can just find one of these folders here and then drag it in. But what's even more powerful is we could contain this entire group. So I'll just click and drag my subscribe group into this backgrounds folder. And now that entire group will be easily accessible. So for example, if I delete everything, I could bring in just the dawn purple background. You'll notice that has the nice noise filter. Or we could bring in my subscribe group. Click and drag that in. Now we have the circle and the backdrop. This next tool I just recently discovered, and I wish I knew about it so much sooner. To get access to it, we're gonna need to first add in a text object. So I'll just type in subscribe. So now that we have our text object, maybe I want to make a change on just a single letter, and that is where the transform glyph tool comes into play. To get access to it, come on down to your arrow tool with this down arrow right to the side of it, then select transform glyph. You'll notice I now have these additional options for just the singular S. So now I can click and drag and place this S anywhere I want. We could do the same with the C, E, pretty much whatever you want. But it's not just limited to that. We can also rotate this on any of these 3D axes. We could stretch it out with the various scaling options here, although it does get a little bit crazy when you do that. And then we could even move it back in Z space. So we have access to all of these different controls, but you can also animate these different controls. So to do that, I'm just gonna jump into the animation mode right here. You can also get to that with A. And so now if I wanted to animate a letter, I would just move ahead in my timeline. Let's go ahead and actually move this object a little bit to give it a keyframe. We'll move forward and then drag this down to wherever we want it to be. We could go to the S and do the exact same thing. And we could even scale the S up if we wanted to. Just know it gets a little bit crazy, but fun to play around with. So now you can see we've started to create these dynamic animations with singular letters. If you're a really skilled animator, you can take this to whole new heights because you can have so much control over each specific letter and bring them into the screen however you so please. Something I am constantly building out inside of Apple Motion is looping backgrounds. And fortunately with this next tip, it's super easy. All we need to do is find, say, this circle object, and maybe we have a specific animation we want to loop with this circle. Let's go on over into our properties and locate the position. We can click to add a keyframe, maybe move forward a bit, have it go down to the bottom, go to the left, and pretty much just do whatever we want. And I'm gonna go all the way to the very center of our project, which will be 5 seconds. This is a 10-second project, and maybe animate it to this point right here. This is where things can get super creative. Rather than going in and manually animating this object to loop over and over again, we could instead use Motion's powerful keyframe editor. To do so, let's get to the keyframe editor by hitting these 3 diamonds, and we can see all of the various keyframes we've added. To make them loop, all we need to do is locate the keyframes here on the left-hand side and select them all holding Shift. Now if we click this down arrow, you'll notice we have some options here. We have after last keyframe and before first keyframe. Let's go ahead and select after last keyframe. A really great way to loop an animation is to have it ping pong, which means it's going to play forward and then it will play in reverse back to its original position. So what we can do is go on over to ping pong. And if you take a look here in the keyframe editor, you'll notice that we have all of the animations playing out here forward and then they perfectly reverse here on the right side. So this is just giving me a perfectly looping animation because now it's going to go back to its original position. But you can get even more creative with this by selecting one of these other options. For example, we could do progressive. What that means is the animation will play through to the end here, and then taking where it is at this position in time, it's going to continue this animation. So you see how the first keyframe point here is at the beginning, going to play down to the bottom left. Well, now that it's over here on the right side, it's going to play out that animation continuing along that same path in a new progressive order. You'll notice that our object is kind of getting out of the screen. It's a little bit hard to see it. And so that is where this next super simple tip comes into play, and that is to show the full view area. To do so, we'll go on up to view, and then we'll scroll on down till we find show full view area. You can also get this with Shift V, and you'll immediately notice that objects that are outside of the render zone are still visible for us to play around with. This makes it so easy to quickly grab an object despite it being out of frame. Something that a lot of people aren't aware of is that you can bring in Adobe Illustrator files directly into Motion, or you could bring in a PDF, something that's going to retain its quality as you super zoom in on it. So I brought in this Adobe Illustrator map from Envato Elements, and I want to scale it up. Let's go ahead and zoom way in. But you'll immediately notice that the quality has degraded a ton. You can barely read the text, it's blocky and pixelated, but fortunately, Motion has a super easy fix for this. All you need to do is jump on over into the media panel. In here, you'll see all of the media that you've imported into your project. Go ahead and select the file that you want to use as a vectorized graphic. From there, we can jump into media. You'll notice this option for fixed resolution, and this is what's causing this issue. You'll notice that that fixed resolution is currently set to 1920 by 1080. So this is only a 1080p graphic, and we've just scaled it into oblivion. So how can we get around this? Well, just disable the fixed resolution, and you'll immediately notice that our text is perfectly legible. That being said, this can cause some major performance hits. If we go over to my layers and select this map and continue to scale it up, you'll notice how choppy the playback is even when I'm moving it around. So if you happen to know roughly the dimensions that your graphic needs to be, you can always go into your media panel, and rather than unchecking fixed resolution, just scale up the resolution. So let's say we know that we need this graphic to be 8K. I could just type in 8,000 pixels. And once Motion updates, we can see that we have perfectly clear text, but we also have the benefits of really fast playback. If these tips were helpful to you and you want to take Apple Motion to the next level, then you might want to check out my brand new Apple Motion Masterclass. I have a super special discount code for you down in the description if you're interested. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.